Hello and welcome to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz, and today we got a waiver wire edition of the pod. This is the first one of its kind. Last year, we'd usually do a Monday Night Football podcast afterwards, and I go through a little bit of waiver stuff. But you know what? Everyone watches Monday Night Football. I thought, why not have a special guest in here, have time to plan things out a little bit better, and ultimately give you guys more actionable fantasy information. Because at the end of the day, we're trying to make sure you guys win your fantasy championship, telling you all, staying up until midnight to tell you all about a game that 90% of you watched anyway. I'm not so sure fits into that. So without further ado, I am happy to be joined by, a guy that's on here 3-4 times a week, if not more. I can't even keep track at this point. Dwayne McFarlane, you guys all know and love him already. Dwayne, we have conquered week one. Now we're on the week two. How you feeling?
Man, I feel good. There's always things we get right and there's things we get wrong. I probably should start the show with a couple of apologies because I think I said David Montgomery and Mike Williams suck on Sunday on our start sit. My eye was all messed up last night, but I was well enough to see that David Montgomery looked good. And I was thinking, man, okay, I'm apparently going to miss on him. So didn't get as many routes and everything as I wanted, but whenever I saw he was basically could have 70% of the rushing attempts had he not left the game for a little bit. So sorry, David Montgomery. And then also Mike Williams. Sorry, because Ian, you gave me a double take when I said he sucked. So
yeah. Believe it or not, people, we did not nail 100% of the start sit questions lobbed our way on Sunday. But I think in general, we did see a lot of, the volume, the storylines that we were hoping to play out come to fruition. So if you guys didn't catch the Monday edition of this podcast, you can catch myself basically going through all the Sunday afternoon games with key snap notes, takeaways beyond the box score and things of that nature. So check that out if you missed it. But today we got Dwayne in the house. So I want to quickly go through some of his top takeaways. You can always find his utilization report on pff.com on Tuesdays, correct, Dwayne?
That's right.
On Tuesdays,
trying to get them to where they're coming out Monday afternoon, evening-ish. I'm still working on today's. You know how week one is. There's so much. I'm just trying to make sure that I cover it all. But yeah, it'll be hitting anytime, either tonight or tomorrow morning.
So if you people like what you're about to hear, make sure you check that out because there's a hell of a lot more of that where it's coming from. So without further ado, let's get after it. Dwayne, we're going to talk about some Detroit Lions, man. Detroit Lions, Houston Texans, just a wild week one. But first of all, TJ Hockenson, I guess the one member of this offense, in addition to Deandre Swift, who we might just be talking about too, that we felt good about. And that did come to fruition. Career high 8 catches, 97 yards in his debut at Jared Goff. That 97-yard mark only trails his career debut set back in 2019, and also an 85% snap rate, which Dwayne, I think you'll get more into because right now it sure looks like Hockenson is the Lions' number one pass game option.
Yeah, man. So at tight end, what you really want to see is you want to see a player that gets up over 80% of the routes. That means they're not having to stay in to block. 70% is still good, but when you get up over 80% and you start getting close to 90%, that's where it really becomes interesting because once you get over 80 and 90%, even if you're only being targeted say 20% of your routes, which is really good for a young tight end, which is where Hockenson is, you really start to get into that recipe where you could be in for, top 4, top 5 season. We'll talk about Pitts here in a minute, but I think Hockenson and Pitts have a chance to really push for us to expand the conversation. I don't think it means they hurdle Waller or Kittle or any of these guys, but I think their numbers look good enough that we could be looking at it at the end of the year and go, wow, there was actually 5 really good tight ends, right? Maybe Kelsey's still the top, but then instead of it just being Waller, right, and an injured Kittle, I think it very easily could be Waller, Kittle, Hockenson, and then we'll talk about Pitts in a minute. But if you look at Hockenson was in a route over 81% of the passing plays. That's up from 73% last year. He was targeted 22% of his routes. He was 19% his first year in the league, 20% his second year in the league. He also improved in his receiving passing grades I shouldn't say each of his first 2 years because his first year he was a rookie, but last year he improved. And so we're just continuing to see that growth, Ian. And it's what you just said. When you look at the Lions, it's really Swift, Hockenson, and Jamal Williams. Like that's their best players. Quintez Cephas actually looked good at the end of that game, so I'm interested to see if he gets some more work. But I think it's the volume is all squarely going to sit, with these three players. So over 80% of the routes, over 20% targets per route run. That's a top tight end. That's a top 5 tight end formula, pretty much over and over and over and over and over and over again. And if you're going to miss the top 5, you're talking like top 6, top 7. So and that's where you had to draft Hockenson, but it's going to be worth it. And I think he has upside, like I said, to push towards the other guys.
As great as Kelsey, Waller, and Kittle are, I think if we had to rank like real life tight ends, a lot of people would still have those guys in your top 3. So much of their fantasy success just comes from that very same volume. Like last year, Kelsey and Waller each had 145 targets. No other tight end had more than 110. When Kittle was, healthy and balling out in 2018, he had 136 targets. In 2019, he had 107 in 14 games. Like Hockenson wasn't that far behind last year. He had 101 targets. That's why he was still a top 5, top 6 tight end. I think he finished tight end 5 last year. So if he can just take that same target total, keep similar efficiency, but see an extra 30, 40 targets, that could be the difference between him joining that tier. Love the way you spelled that one out, Dwayne. We are not done with the Detroit Lions, though, and that is because we got Deandre Swift coming in. Pretty shitty pregame report, whoever came out and had to say that, Swift was going to be taking, a true backseat to Jamal Williams or whatever the exact verbiage was, but was not the case. Not to suggest Jamal Williams wasn't also involved, but I guess the important thing, Dwayne, which we say on this podcast a lot, the Detroit Lions have a 2-back backfield and nothing more, and we can live with that in today's NFL. We don't want 3 or 4 back committees. Lions got 2 of them. Maybe not. I don't think they're going to be scoring 30 plus every week, but can we live with both Deandre Swift and Jamal Williams as long as this sort of usage persists?
Yeah, I think we can. And so when I look at this situation, I go back and even think back when we talked about them in the summer, we specifically called out, okay, you got Dan Campbell, knee biter, coming over from the Saints, where he had seen Mark Ingram, Latavius Murray both work in tandem with Kamara. He may have came there the year after Ingram left, but he for sure saw the Murray Kamara thing work, right? And then if you look at, Anthony Lynn, who comes over from the Chargers, well, we just recently saw him make, the Eckler / Melvin Gordon thing work. And so when I heard those comments, before the game, the number one thing that popped in my head is, well, it's right back to the A-back stuff, right? Who typically gets the first carry of the game? It's the A-back. So they're the starter. But what I loved about Deandre Swift yesterday, and Jamal Williams looked really good. And I think he's going to your point, he's going to be involved. We're not saying he's not going to be involved. My bigger point is don't let Jamal Williams outscored Deandre Swift yesterday in fantasy points, if I'm remembering right, Ian. I don't have it right up in front of me, but I think he finished his RB6 or something.
I think both RB1s. They both had a hell of a game.
Yeah, they were both RB1s. Hang on. I'm just pulling it up real quick because, man, I've been writing about so much. You guys are probably like, God, how do you not just know that off the top of your head? I'm asking myself that right now. But yeah, through yesterday's games, RB2 and RB4, right? Ooh. So, yeah, we're not saying that's going to continue. But the thing that gets me the most excited about Deandre Swift is the fact that how he's being used. And when I think about the Lions, I think, man, they're going to trail a lot. Like that immediately comes to mind. And so Swift is the back that's insulated from that. So he was in a route on 63% of the Lions passing plays yesterday. Actually, it was over 65%. That's Alvin Kamara like. He handled over 50% of the rushing attempts. So that's actually a little better than what we've seen from Alvin Kamara. Again, not saying he is Alvin Kamara, so you guys don't confuse this. But I think if you went back and you watched the game, Ian, I know you probably went back and watched some of it, or if you didn't have it on live, he had a couple of really good plays, where he made a juke in the open field. He had juice. He looked good, in my opinion. Do I think he is the best NFL running back ever and we can't find things wrong with him on film? Yeah, sure we can. But this is fantasy football and he's out there on the field in the situations that matter. So just let me give you a little quick run through. If you go back to 2011 and you look at backs that have been over 60%, right, of the routes, between 60 and 70%, because there's some freaks like CMC that get up in the 80% range. So but between 60 and 70% of the routes for your team, and at least 40% of the rushing attempts. Now, remember, yesterday, Swift actually did better than that. Here are your finishes for those backs since 2011. 16, 3, 4, 5, 9, 1, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 9, 3, 1. He's going to have a huge year. Is he going to score what he did yesterday every time? No, because they're not going to run 1,000 plays every week. Yeah. But they were up tempo, to be fair, early and often. Their very first drive, they were up tempo. It wasn't just after they got behind. So I think we're going to see an increase in plays. I think he's going to be a key part of the passing attack. I think he's going to continue to be over 60% of the routes, run. I think he's going to continue to hover around 50% of the attempts. So all that leaves room for Jamal Williams to still be involved. I just think Jamal Williams was more of the outlier performance, because getting the performance he got on his underlyings, that doesn't repeat itself as often. So for me, Deandre Swift, looks great. Jamal Williams, I still like, but if I could sell him high right now, Ian, I would.
It's not a bad deal. I don't think we're getting any more top 5 performances out of Jamal for the next few weeks, at least, as long as DeAndre is doing his same thing. But yeah, after last season, the only quote unquote problems with Swift were he didn't have these great rushing efficiency stats, and he obviously had the late season concussion that was concerning for moving forward from that. But just in terms of what he brought to the table as a receiver, man, I mean, he did look different from day one in terms of what he was able to do. We had that hilarious Juwan Johnson quote where he was literally saying, like, DeAndre Swift can move his body in ways that I just can't even replicate. And it's like, damn, Juwan, look out for your own job a little bit more, bud. But anyway, I think you're right in that, Swift in this offense, they're going to be playing from behind, man, which is just going to be perfect for him. In the Lions' last 7 games, they have allowed 41 points, 37, 47, 46, 31, 30, and 41 points. Atrocious defense. Maybe Campbell will get some playing hard more in the future, but come on, guys. It's really going to be hard, Dwayne, to keep Swift out of the top, 10 in PPR.
Yeah, I don't see how I don't think he'll be outside of the top 10. I think he's going to finish inside the top 10 for the season, assuming he's healthy.
Remember, people, target and full PPR scoring is basically worth 2.7 carries. So yeah, Swift, we don't need 200 carries on the year. He can still get there. We just want those targets, and he has plenty of those coming his way. Now, for a disappointing one, Dwayne, I described this Brandon Ayuk situation on the podcast as the following, because, a lesser man would have victory lapped it hard, because I was on record with Deebo Samuel over Brandon Ayuk this week. I was not on Deebo over Ayuk because I thought that Ayuk would work behind Trent freaking Sherfield. I just thought that Deebo, with the manner of which he gets his targets, I thought it was more sustainable from QB to QB. With that said, what in the actual hell is going on with Brandon Ayuk? Dwayne, I just want to read one quote from Kyle Shanahan before I throw it over to you, where courtesy of Matt Barrows from The Athletic, this is what Shanny said. They've, talking about Ayuk and Sherfield, been rotating a lot throughout the preseason, but Ayuk's only been back a week after he tweaked his hamstring, which we want to be smart with that. Also, Trent Sherfield earned the right to be out there more. So we need to consider, is this more of a hamstring issue or more of a playing time issue? And I will say this, Dwayne, I'd be a lot more willing to buy into the hamstring injury thing if they weren't throwing Ayuk out there on punt return. Like, come on, man. Like, that's one of the most dangerous parts of the game. And also, if you look at his usage last season, same freaking coaching staff, at least Kyle Shanahan at the top, he was hurt for parts of that year too. When he played over 70% of snaps in every single game. We have not seen them like actively limit Ayuk snaps because of injury before. So with all that said, what are you making of this? Because I know a lot of people who drafted this guy as a top 24 receiver are awfully disappointed with what happened in week 1.
Yeah, for now, he's not going to be in my starting lineup for sure until we know more. I think you bring up the right stuff. Matt Waldman had actually responded to a tweet I had put out yesterday. I guess he had just watched, Shanahan's presser and what he had said. And so it does sound like the hamstring issue was part of it. So that's the positive way to look at it. If you want to say, hey, glass half full kind of thing, and I just spent, a top, a round 5 pick on Brandon Ayuk, which I did plenty of. I loved everything about the guy. I mean, did great in the reception perception from Matt Harmon. Did well in all the metrics we look at for breakout receivers, all that kind of stuff. I mean, Ayuk was up there. Now, Shanahan, I just don't know how to trust him. And I mean, look, Dante Pettis had a really good finish to his rookie season as well, if you remember back. And next year, Shanahan just iced him, man, completely, just iced him. Of course, maybe part of that is Pettis just isn't good. He hasn't been able to catch on anywhere else either. But there's just, we've seen this stuff with Shanahan. I mean, we'll get to the next one in a minute, but I mean, Sermon just inactive, after, sharing the backfield on the early drives, in the preseason. So for those of you that say preseason doesn't matter, there's definitely merit to that. With certain teams, there's just less that you can take away. I kind of try to keep track of those, but Shanahan's always all over the place.
Usually,
so it's just
I don't know, teams employ these certain people, they kind of cover the team. They try to write articles, maybe guessing, using their inside information from being at practice to maybe help lead us in directions where we could, maybe find out that the RB2 isn't going to play at all, or maybe that the wide receiver 1 is actually going to be the wide receiver 4. I don't know, Dwayne. It'd be a little helpful if, some of these local journalists that are around these teams could help us out a little bit, that in addition to the preseason stuff. But sorry, continue. You can tell.
No, it's funny because but you're right. We do lean in, to those folks. And it just shows to me what it probably says is none of them knew either. And this is just the crap Shanahan does. Because if they did, they would want to write about it. It would be a big story to say, hey, Brandon Ayuk's not even going to start. Hey, Trey Sermon's 4th string. Like, that would be a piece that would get a lot of eyeballs on it. And their leadership team would be really happy. So with me for Ayuk, looking at it, I mean, only 54% of the routes. The thing is, Ian, like, if he's not healthy, I mean, why would they play him at all?
That's what I'm saying, especially on special teams. Like, come on.
Yeah, I don't get it. So I don't know that I buy the hamstring thing. Shanahan's constantly throwing these curveballs, but I mean, if you look, so only 54% of the routes, 47% of the snaps. And what a really telling thing, right, is who's out there when you really need it. So like, say you had a player that you just wanted to protect, but you knew when crunch time came, we're going to have him active so we can have him out there win. Oh, on 3rd down to give our quarterback another good target. No, only 50% of the 3rd downs did he even get out there. So he really wasn't on the field in any of the situations you would hope to see based on a player that we think is good. And I'm completely worried about this one. If we get another week of this, by 3 weeks into this, I'm cutting. Dwayne.
Oh my God, you said.
Yeah, 3 weeks in, I mean, I'm done. Like, I'll be moving. Now, there has to be somebody else worth picking up, and it depends on your roster size. It depends on format. But I've just seen this, with Shanahan before. So I'm gonna look at it as glass half full. But for now, you have to have him out of your starting lineups.
Dwayne just used the C word on Brandon Ayuk, people. This is how bad the situation
Hopefully no one comes in right there at that spot.
I'm 100% with you in that we cannot start this guy for the foreseeable future. And if we do get more weeks of this and there's just no sign of things changing, yeah, maybe we can revisit, the C word over here. With that said, though, Dwayne, does this make Deebo Samuel a weekly top 15, top 20 at a minimal option? Right, because he was already like an upside wide receiver 3 with his own workload. And now if they're going to give him the air yards and all this shit that we thought was going Ayuk's away, I mean, Deebo, it's not like he was someone that couldn't be used downfield and couldn't catch the ball downfield. They were just pretty, rigid with the roles that their wide receivers had last year. So if Shanahan wants to make Deebo his alpha 1, we better treat him the same as in
52% of targets, 58% targets per route run, 60% of the team air yards. Yeah. I mean, 50% of his targets came on freaking play action passes. Like, you can't ask for a better stat line than what Deebo put up, and what he finished as wide receiver 2, 3 for the week.
Maybe
he was way up. Yeah. Was it 1? Yeah. Again, let me just
fumble, but
let me look at this.
People, we've had it's about 6 months to memorize a lot of the same stats. We go back and forth,
and now they've all changed.
Now they have all changed. So please forgive us for a little bit of this.
Wide receiver 3, 33.9 points in a PPR. So that's PPR. But yeah, I mean, way up there. I mean, that's a big score. If you get a couple scores like that on your roster, I mean, you're winning for the week, even if the rest of your team sucked. So
it's not that crazy to think about when you look at if you look at our week 1 rankings, both Ayuk and Deebo probably should have been everyone's top 36. If we're putting Ayuk now outside the top 50, like he's probably going to be for week 2, that would, those yards and those targets need to go somewhere else.
Deebo's got to be top 24 every week now. Like last week, think I had him higher than most. I felt good about it. I loved the matchup and everything for him last week. And to your point, I just didn't buy into the whole thing that, oh, he's just going to catch passes at the line of scrimmage. And I knew that he would get used in that way, but to me, that was just a bonus. He's going to get those looks plus other kinds of looks.
Yeah, I mean, I was never down on Ayuk. It was just more, I thought it was going to be more close than everyone else did. Same thing with Robbie Anderson, DJ Moore, Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, as that kind of came out. A lot of situations like that where sometimes you can leverage it, get the cheaper option, and hopefully profit. Now, Dwayne, let's talk about the backfield that's on everyone's mind. You said before, Trey Sermon was a healthy scratch. Apparently just lost the job. Again, would have been a nice thing to maybe know at some point throughout the offseason, but we will leave it at that. As Shanahan said after the game, though, there is no firm hierarchy in the backfield. Specifically, Jimmy Garoppolo said Elijah stepped up. He really did. Hasty did too. Those guys carried the load. Raheem was off to a hot start too, yada, yada, yada. Basically, no one in San Francisco has given us any sort of, feel for how this backfield is going to be moving forward. I guess my main question is, because they had Sermon out of the game, I wonder what the plan was for Raheem Mostert, because Elijah Mitchell dominated this backfield over Hasty. Now, was the plan for Mostert for him to dominate this backfield over both of them, or were we going to see the 1A, 1B with Mostert and Mitchell that we were expecting to see from Sermon and Mostert? Because if it's the latter, if it's going to be 1A, 1B, I think Sermon will probably step in and have a good amount of value from day one. I hope so, or it'll be Hasty. We don't freaking know, Dwayne. But I guess my question is, do you anticipate this being Mitchell or whoever's backfield, or are we going to see some sort of a committee set in?
Yeah, I think we're going to see a committee, but we're not good at predicting Kyle Shanahan, clearly.
Yeah,
no one else is either. But I mean, if you look at it, after Mostert left the game, Mitchell handled 68% of the snaps, 78% of the rushing attempts. JaMychal Hasty played all of the long down and distance and all the 2-minute offense. So I think that's what we know. Hasty is the receiving back. And so if they then turn the early downs into a rotation between, Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon, it's probably a 3-person backfield. But the way I'm looking at it is, you have to add Elijah Mitchell. Like if you're playing in a 12-team league or 10-team leagues and 8-team leagues, you can probably ignore it if you feel like you're really stacked at running back, unless you're trying to block, an opponent. But the bottom line is, and this is what makes it so maddening, Ian, is we don't know for sure what's going to happen. But what we do know is if you happen to own the Kyle Shanahan running back that all of a sudden does get all the work, like he's got to be on your team. And so it puts you in a real conundrum from a standpoint of, well, how much do I look at, as far as, my available salary for fab dollars, how much of it do I put, on a player like Mitchell, because he needs to be rostered in most formats. So the way I'm looking at him, today we heard Mostert's out at least 8 weeks. So we know you've got at least 8 weeks of whatever's about to happen. And it could be an unpredictable thing that happens every week, but on the chance that Elijah Mitchell is actually the back to own in this backfield for the next 8 weeks. In my opinion, if you're hurting at running back, you got to look at spending 15 to 25% of your fab dollars to get him now, and fully knowing that you could vomit next week. But the upside is everything's a risk reward scenario, right? So the upside of if Mitchell hits is huge. That's why you have to be willing to spend that money. The downside is he's not even the starter next week. It could happen, like we've seen it. Or, we could just see hot hand every week. That could totally happen too. But the upside is big enough that if he takes over that job and looks great and just holds it through the season, like, man, I don't know what your thought is, but I think it'll take you a minimum 15% of your fab to probably, even be in contention. 25% is probably about where you're going to have to be to have a shot at him. Like if you did it 10 times and wanted to get him half the time, probably 20 to 25% of your fab.
One of my bullets I had written down, because I try to take notes, preparation, failure to prepare is preparing to fail. Damn it, I'll get that.
It's preparing to failure, yes.
You could imagine how that quote goes. Either way, one of the things I had written down, upside warrants going after these guys, don't blow the bank, 30% ? So yeah, I would say 15 and 30%, know your roster, know your league, and go from there. Don't get too crazy. There's always that one league mate in your league, that goes ahead and will blow 70% on, the week 2 waiver wire targets, So don't be that guy, but I do think 15 to 25% more than fair. Because again, Dwayne, we have seen that upside and we've seen it recently. Like just go back to the end of last season, Jeff Wilson combined carries and targets the final 3 weeks, 20, 24, and 27. He ripped off RB27, RB5, and RB7 finishes. Again, I lean with you. I do think this was going to be more of like what we saw in the middle of last year, whereas Mostert and Wilson kind of splitting 12 to 15 carries and targets combined each. I think we see that with Mitchell, with Sermon, hopefully.
My favorite play.
Hasty. What's up?
My favorite play on this situation, my favorite way to play the situation is someone goes out and does what you just said. They spend whatever, 40, 50% of their fab to make sure they get Mitchell. And you'll see this, and they drop Sermon to do it. Then you swoop right in.
Yep.
And you pick up Sermon. Wherever Sermon has dropped people, pick him up. Pick him up. I don't care what the quote said. I don't care that we're told he was beat out. We really have no clue. For all we know, it's something disciplined with week one that Sermon didn't play. That seems honestly kind of likely to me, given to your point. No one knew this. No one knew.
As much as preseason doesn't matter, like what utility does Shanahan get from playing Sermon ahead of Mitchell and Hasty with the first team offense?
Nothing. Nobody cares who the running back is in San Francisco from a defensive perspective. They know they have to defend the run no matter what. It doesn't matter who's back there, So yeah, there's not any utility in my mind.
Madness, Dwayne. Madness in San Francisco. And it's pissing off.
Hey guys, think the plan could have been Mostert is going to handle the early down work.
Yeah.
Mitchell's going to be the receiving back. That could have been the plan. And you could easily next week come out there and be like, holy crap, Sermon got 65% of the carries, and now Mitchell is taking the role that JaMychal Hasty was in. All these ranges of outcomes are there. And so to me, the cheapest chip that I can play, which is if Mostert gets dropped, just swooping in and grabbing him. I like that.
Raheem Mostert. If you look at all running
backs, just gave a sigh.
If you look at all running backs in 2021, minimum 2 carries, number 1 in yards per carry. Raheem
minimum
Mostert.
2 carries. Yes.
10 yards per carry, Dwayne. I'm not crying. You're crying. Damn it. My freaking one of my highest on running backs in best ball. Oh, well. We'll worry.
And it was going to be there, man. It was going to be there. It was right away. Those first couple of drives, it was him. And then he just,
I thought I was the smartest man alive for about 60 minutes after Sermon got healthy scratch, and then it just, blew up 15 minutes into week 1. 15 minutes.
Oh, dude, I was with you. I moved him to running back 8 in my rankings on the site that morning, Yeah. So Pain is all I feel, but we will push forward. Let's talk about Kyle Pitts, who did not live up to the insane DFS rostership he had, or just kind of the overall hype going into this one. With that said, Dwayne, I think a little bit closer look at his usage will reveal we are, in fact, looking at the Falcons, not a tight end really, but a number 2 pass game option. Yeah. Go get Kyle Pitts right now. Do whatever you need to do to sell your league Kyle Pitts owner on the fact that, just another tight end that, is going to bust in his rookie season. That's the memo you want to send out, to the league owner that owns them. Obviously, you guys know how to handle your league mates, but I would do everything possible to get Kyle Pitts. We already talked about Hockenson, but if I were to re-rank tight ends today, I would have Kyle Pitts number 4. Ooh. So 80% of the routes, we already talked about the 80% mark earlier. So my question with Pitts was, is he going to be 60%? Is he going to be 70%? Is he going to be 80%? And we talked about this on a past episode. I basically broke down what it takes to really get a good rate of return on having a chance at hitting top 3 tight end. Guess what? He's over that number. The next number, 28% targets per route run. That's freaking insane. That's higher than Travis Kelsey this week. Look, really good tight ends are in the 24 to 25% range. Now, it's 1 week, but it's the 1 week that we have, and we all know that they spent a really high pick on the guy. So it's not like this person's coming out of nowhere and we're like, who's this guy with 28% of the targets, per route run? That's not what's going on. We know they want to get him the ball. So if you go back and if you look at that, and you want to say, all right, how many of the tight ends, look like what, whenever that happens? Here are the finishes since 2011 where you hit 80% and at least 24% in the 2 numbers I gave you. So that 80% of the routes, 24% targets per route run. Here are the finishes, Ian. Are you ready?
I am ready, Dwayne.
1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3. That's it. That shows you how hard it is. No, it's Kelsey, Waller, Kelsey, Ertz, Kittle.
Wow, none of them. Well, screw me. Okay.
Yeah. Well, 2011, and by then they had ramped Gronk down. Gronk was more of a 70%, 75% route.
Lesson learned.
Yeah. But it was injuries mostly. It wasn't a per game thing. It was his targets. It was more Gronk typically missed time every season. So, but Gronk is one of the guys that would do it with just 70%, super elite stud still. But so the point being, look, guys, I'm not saying he's Kelsey, Waller, but look, we didn't know Waller was Waller until just 2 years ago. We didn't know Kelsey was Kelsey until he broke out. We didn't know Kittle was Kittle until he broke out. I'm telling you right now, like Pitts is about to do this. And if you can get him, you got to go get him. You got to do whatever it is you need to do. Don't seem desperate. You can give him the, hey, I'll call you. I'll let you know if I'm interested kind of thing. Whatever it is that you guys do, you can do it. And you ladies as well, because we know you guys do that to us for sure. Like you are way better at that game than me. But Pitts is a must go get, Ian, if you can. Everything there looks great.
I just love that they are using him as a legit receiver. 80% of his routes were from the slot or out wide. Last year, Mark Andrews, 73%, Travis Kelsey, 69%, Hockenson, 58%, Waller, 50%, Kittle, 44%. Like Kyle Pitts' agent. For the 50th time, this podcast keeps telling you that maybe Kyle Pitts should just hire you and me, Dwayne, as his agent, because the only thing we will do is push for that positional change. And because for whatever reason, wide receivers are paid more than tight ends.
You know what? You just hatched a business plan. Like imagine like if agents were armed with like the utilization stuff, Ian.
We just
come on. All right.
Hey, by the way, PFF, we're gonna keep doing the podcast, but we're also gonna start in agency business as we're recording. Hope that's cool. All right, we got one more big takeaway. Nice one to end on because this was a guy you and myself were hyping up all off season. Joe Mixon. I was happy enough to catch this game in real time, and he looked good, Dwayne. Some of these fourth quarter runs in particular, refusing to go out of bounds, running hard, running through contact. Overall, he ended up with 8 broken tackles just on carries alone. That was the highest mark in week 1. So I know he got a lot of grief last year, just a volume guy. He only balled out against the Jaguars. I'm not saying the Vikings are the world's best defense either, but when I see him running through Harrison Smith to go gain an extra 6 yards and then finish the next would-be tackler, over top of him as well, it's looking good, man. So I know Samaje Perine was a little bit involved, but it looks like Joe Mixon, if he is, not gassed, not too tired, he'll be out there first, second, and third down moving forward. And with that, we have a top 6 fantasy bet.
Yeah, man. It's Mixon time. 78% of the snaps. 81% of the rushing attempts, 55% of the routes. And it wasn't because he wasn't out there either. I'll get to that in a minute, but he was blocking. But 55% is still a good mark. Remember, you get up towards 60 and 65, you're getting into elite territory. This is just under that. But 15% of the targets, Ian, on a team that's got 3 really good receivers. 28% targets per route run. So what does that tell you? Typically what that tells you is it's not just swing passes, that you're getting some design looks. And if you go look, at Mixon this week, he actually did have several first read looks, which is not normal for running backs. Typically, a running back's first read looks will be like around the 30%, 25% mark, and he was up over 50% this week. So it's not just getting him, the ball in just a check down situation. They are actually designing some things for him as well. Perine, they didn't want him out there in a route. He was hardly out there, for any carries either. Perine, yes, got a little bit of work, but it's fine. Somebody's going to relieve everyone. This is as 1A situation as you can get. Like it's a 1A and then like there's a 2C behind him. And we wanted to see, did Chris Evans come out here and get involved in the passing game? Because that's where he's really good. We didn't see that in week 1. So that's a positive. So 100% of the work inside the 5, 100% of long down and distance situations, 100% of the 2-minute offense, all owned by Joe Mixon. So if you drafted Joe Mixon in the 2nd round, as recommended, like go pop some champagne, do something. We just need him to stay healthy. This is going to be a really big season for Joe Mixon.
The biggest concern was Chris Evans taking the pass down work. That didn't happen. Full steam ahead, people. All the Joe Mixon RB1 season. I love it. And also, Week 1 may be over, but the season's just getting started. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. To kick off Week 2, DraftKings is giving new customers $200 in free bets instantly when they bet $1 on any football game. Listen up, because you don't want to miss this. Head to DraftKings Sportsbook app now and place a bet of $1 on any Week 2 game to receive $200 in free bets instantly. The Sportsbook is not yet available in your state. DraftKings still has huge cash prizes up for grabs all season long with their daily fantasy contests. DraftKings is giving all new customers a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes with their first deposit. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code PFF to receive $200 in free bets when you place a $1 bet in any football game. With promo code PFF this week at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older. New Jersey, Indiana, or Pennsylvania only. New customers only. Minimum $5 deposit. $1 wager required. One per customer. Restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, or in Indiana, 1-800-9-WITH-IT. Dwayne, let's talk some waivers now. So I guess looking at this group as a whole, I would say, don't do anything drastic. I don't think there's necessarily like league winning guys. I remember being on this podcast with you last year in week 3. We saw Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, like snaps starting to spike. And we were saying, hey, now is the time to still get these studs. Huge starting roles are coming to fruition. I'm not saying there's not usable guys out here. And hey, maybe a couple injuries break their way and they do end up being your league winner. But I would just say in general, a lot of the guys we're going to talk about, I think you're going to hear us saying, caution, maybe a decent bench ad, not someone you should be. I don't think anyone here you should be blowing, 40, 50% of your fab on by any stretch of the imagination. So with that said, let's start at quarterback, Dwayne. Jameis Winston threw 5 touchdowns. In doing so, he set the record for the lowest passing yardage in a game ever, where he threw 5 touchdowns, which it's like not a negative. It's just weird, man. It's just a cool stat. Good for you, Jameis. Keep being weird. I'm happy he's out there again. He made numerous nice throws. The bomb to Deontay was great. The first touchdown to Juwan Johnson was also gorgeous. He's put it exactly where he could only get it. With that said, Dwayne, QB3 performance on the week for right now. But as we talked about in this podcast, Jameis hasn't always been this super fantasy friendly quarterback. Okay, he had the QB 8 fantasy points per game in 2019. Before that, he never finished higher than QB 15. But hey, that was 3 years ago. Jameis has had LASIK since then, and now he's got Sean Payton calling his plays. Are you buying Jameis as a QB that we should be trying to get and hoping for QB1 production more weeks than not moving forward?
I don't think we're going to see it, but I do like him. I think he's definitely, if you're hurting, maybe you waited and you own Fitzpatrick, or maybe, you drafted Trey Lance and you're not happy with the other quarterback, that you paired him with. I think that puts Jameis, into the conversation. They played 63% of their plays with a lead. So that's part of what goes into, the low passing numbers. They didn't really feel like they had to throw the ball. 37% of the plays, they were actually close. They never trailed the whole game. So, there's going to be situations where you're going to get more yardage and you're going to lose efficiency. The efficiency, can spike whenever the defense is fully expecting run, like all the time, which happens whenever you get up as much as they were, and it makes throwing touchdowns easier. Like the element of surprise, Ian, you played football. The element of surprise is the biggest thing. That's why you hear folks constantly from an analytics perspective pushing on teams to do things different, like on early downs and things like that, not just to get ahead of the sticks and because of the math, but also because the defenses that's when they can be surprised the most, is in situations where they don't just know automatically that you're going to throw the ball. Once they know that, it becomes much harder to throw the ball, which is where things like play action and other things come in. So having said all that, with Winston, I still think he's a QB2. But I do think that he's going to push in for QB1, opportunities, throughout the season. So, I would put him right there in the mix, Ian, now with like the Tannehills, some of the players that are all right around that range. I would put Joe Burrow in that range as well. So I think, you're going to see you'll see a churn with those guys. So it's not like somebody you have to roster, but I definitely feel better about him, than like Teddy Bridgewater and guys like that.
Definitely ahead of Teddy. I would just say, I don't think his upcoming schedule is like really worth investing too much in. The Panthers, they seem good. I think a lot of the pressure they got on Zach Wilson was more a result of Wilson and that Jets offensive line. I need to go back and re-watch that one still. So, we'll see on that. But even if that's, a good one after that, we get the Patriots, the Giants, who I think are a little bit better on D than they showed yesterday, Washington, Seattle, who we'll see if they're bad or good, and then also Tampa Bay. So I just don't think we're getting, one smash spot after another. It's why we, rested our hat on Kirk Cousins as this guy, because he does have one good matchup after another. So Jameis, yeah, he's in that conversation. I'd say he's in the same tier as Cousins and Tannehill and some of these other guys. Ultimately, I would still be riding with Cousins as our streamer here for the next few weeks. Dwayne, I sent a tweet like 2 weeks ago just saying I forget what the stupid phrase I had. It was like, don't start a Texans running back, even if there's a fire. It could have been it. It was like, I think I even went as far as say, like, how much do you have to hate yourself to start a Houston Texans running back? And 3 of them go ahead and score touchdowns on me. Rex Burkhead, I'm sure, could have if they felt like it in that one. Are we seriously buying Mark Ingram having more than 20 carries ever again? Maybe in his entire career?
No, you don't want to own this situation. This is something you just let somebody else go waste their fab on. Okay.
Let's all laugh at me for being wrong on this, but move on.
Yeah. But what are the chances the Texans ever lead this much in a game? They're just not going to. They're not a good team. They're still not. So that hasn't magically changed. And so they're typically going to be trailing, and you're going to have 4 running backs you're trying to get the ball to. This script worked out perfectly for Ingram. And it led, to a game where he actually got 68% of the rushing attempts, which equaled 26. So, and again, I have penalties included here, so it might be like slightly off, from that. But the point being, at 60% or more in the future, like, he'll be lucky to hit like 15. And the other part is you had Phillip Lindsay fumble down inside the 5. And so that took his numbers down. So I really expect, Ingram and Lindsay to really split the ball more. But to your point, they have 4 guys involved. You had Ingram at 46% of the snaps, David Johnson, 28%, Phillip Lindsay at 26%, Rex Burkhead at 13%. Guys, this is the Patriots all over again without any kind of good offense. So let your league mates go waste their money on Mark Ingram and you focus elsewhere.
Awesome game, Tyrod. That was a lot of fun. I'm happy, you got to have another chance to start after your freaking team doctor punctured your lung to make you lose that job. But yeah, this is basically the 2021 version of the Jaguars beating the Colts in week 1 last year and then losing 15 straight games to end the year. I think that's what we're going to see with the Houston Texans. And keep an eye out on that Houston Texans medical doctor, man. Now that they know Tyrod can win a game or 2, I would not be letting any needles anywhere near me if I was Tyrod Taylor. So excuse me, Tony Jones, someone that I think was already a popular addition, after we had the Latavius Murray release, but I just kind of wanted to go over what his stats were in this first game through 3 quarters. Because again, this was a blowout. Kamara was at 41 snaps, Tojo at 13. Kamara had the carry lead 18-7. Kamara had the target lead 4-1. We're not getting like standalone value. If you're starting Tojo as your flex, you better have, multiple horrible reasons that led you to have to be able to do that. I think the handcuff, possibility remains though. With that said, Dwayne, I guess, do you still consider Tojo to be someone we need to kind of be trying to get at the end of rosters? Or did you see that standalone usage and just say, maybe someone that if it comes to it, you can feel comfortable cutting?
No, I still want to have him, but it's in deeper leagues. If you're playing in, a 10-team league and you've only got 13 or 14 spots on your roster, it makes it tougher to own someone like Tojo. But if you're playing in a 20 roster format, 12-team league, Tojo should be rostered everywhere. He shouldn't be dropped. I would say once you get to like 16, 17 roster spots deep, Tojo should be on all of those rosters. I do think there's still a chance that he carves out some standalone value. But we'll have to see. He's still a young player that was, undrafted, the year before. So it's great for Kamara, right? It is 73% of the snaps to Kamara, 35% to Tojo. And it's like you said, it was later in the game when he got some of the work. But when I did see him out there, Ian, I'm curious on your thoughts. Like, I thought he looked pretty good. Like, he didn't act like the game was too big for him or anything. He looked explosive. So I put him in that same tier with Madison. I put him in the same tier. I think we won't talk about him today, but Chuba Hubbard didn't have any problems from Royce Freeman. He looks like he's still the main cuff to CMC. So I think he belongs right there in that tier. And if you're sitting there and you've got one really good running back and you're just trying to make do at running back 2, and let's say you're piecing together like Nyheim Hines and whatever, you name 2 or 3 other players that you're just kind of rotating in and out, and you want to have a player or 2 like just sitting there that like, wow, if the starter goes down, I do think Tojo still belongs in that conversation.
Yeah, and I think he's looked fine throughout the preseason. Like, honestly, now that we know Sean Payton thinks he looks fine, that's all that matters. Like, I hear some people saying like, oh, we saw him at Notre Dame, like he's not this big of a deal. That was 2016 through 2019.
Yeah, and
like,
Sean Payton doesn't care what those people think, so it doesn't matter anymore.
Sean Payton does not give a single fuck what anyone thinks. Look at the amount of no-name people that he has brought through this team. Like, are you really going to draw your line at Tony Jones? Like, that's where you think it stops? I don't think so. But with that said, let's talk about another Saint real quick while we're on the team, Juwan Johnson. So this one was very interesting. I did not realize that he only played 12 snaps in that entire game. We had Garrett Griffin getting 17, mostly as a blocker, and Adam Troutman. All those dead best ball teams, Dwayne, not quite an Undertaker GIF moment. He didn't exactly have a great game. I thought he could have scored a touchdown at one point, but it was going to be tough, and he let the ball go right through his hands. So we'll never know if he could have broken the tackle to get there. Either way, are you buying this Juwan Johnson? Because he looked good on the opportunities he got, but man, like these are like Mo Alley Cox numbers here. Like there's only so much you can do for a guy projected to play 10 freaking snaps a game potentially.
Yeah. If you pick up Juwan Johnson, what your belief is that he's going to grow his role based on what you saw in week 1.
What's going to happen?
It could happen, but he's not an inline tight end. So he's going to have trouble. That means he's going to be mostly in the slot. This team runs a lot of 21 personnel as well, which means he's off the field anytime that happens. If they go full 11, if he's not the player in the slot, if they put a receiver in the slot, he's probably not on the field because he's not getting much of the inline work. So it's just going to be a tricky situation. You do need to believe that his role is going to improve. You do not want to be starting Juwan Johnson next week. In your fantasy lineups, Ian, you basically already hit it, but only 19% of the snaps, 40% of the routes, 16% of the targets, 39% targets per route run, right? That's what you like. When you see it, you're like, wow, they're drawing up plays for him. He's getting open. The quarterback likes him. But it's just one data point. So Troutman's really still the player to own. 82% of the snaps, 72% of the routes, 26% of the targets.
Oh, that's
37% targets per route run for Adam Troutman. That's only 2% below where we just talked about with Juwan Johnson, but he's getting all the snaps. What you're looking for is for someone to drop Troutman thinking, oh, well, if he hadn't already been dropped, he was already dropped in a lot of leagues. People thought he was hurt. He is the smart pickup, and you can probably get him for very little. Juwan Johnson's really a fade for me, especially if he's going to go for very much. Now, if you play in a super deep league, tight end premium, that kind of thing, Juwan Johnson needs to be rostered. And so again, deep leagues means 20 people, on every roster, 12 team leagues, that kind of thing. Then Juwan Johnson, especially if it's tight end premium, Juwan Johnson, sure, put him on the end of your bench, but still don't be starting him.
Well said, Mr. McFarland. Now let's talk about a situation that might have some more clarity by the time people listen to this on Tuesday morning. And I am talking about the Baltimore Ravens backup running back. So going into their matchup against the Raiders, I'm knocking on wood. Please don't give us any more injuries between now and Tuesday. I've already had like 3 podcasts get burned by this damn backfield and that sort of thing. Tyson Williams, fully expected to be the number 1 running back, but Latavius seems to have the head start on being number 2 guy with Le'Veon Bell and Devontae Freeman, not active, still on the practice squad. We also have Trenton Cannon there as number 3. I guess, Dwayne, I'm most interested to see, will Cannon actually have a small offensive role, or is he going to be strictly special teams? I think it'll be the latter, and we see Tyson kind of have maybe this week, especially like a 70-30 kind of commanding split over Latavius Murray. After that, though, it's kind of anyone's guess to how this could play out. Do you see Latavius eventually emerging as a running back to own in Baltimore, or is this another situation where probably go let the kind of irresponsible high bidder go get him?
Yeah, I would let the irresponsible high bidder go get him. Having said that, it does appear that he's next in line if something does happen to Tyson, Williams. So, from that perspective, he's a player that needs to be rostered. I just don't want to go crazy, with Latavius Murray. So, I'm thinking 5 to 7% type bid if you need it back. I mean, if you want to push it to 10%, you can, but I'm not going any higher than that. I don't expect him to pass, Tyson Williams. I mean, this is a player that's up there in age. His explosiveness has dissipated over the last several years. So it's, now don't get me wrong, it's a great scheme, and it opens a lot of huge holes because when the defense has to worry about Lamar Jackson, it makes it creates better rushing lanes, for these running backs. And so he's going to be in that situation, but I think it's going to be, 25% of the carries to Lamar Jackson, 35 to 40%, to Tyson minimum. And then, you got another 20 to 25% to your next back, which could be Latavius Murray. And then you've got another 5 to 10%, to somebody like Cannon. And so I think it's just going to be a situation where you're going to have a tough time starting Latavius Murray. You're more picking him up on the chance that the Ravens, have another unfortunate injury, which would be crazy to lose 4 backs to knee injuries or to any kind of injury. So I'm with you. It's like I'm tempering my expectations. I'm definitely putting in a enforcement kind of bid on him.
Yeah.
So I don't just let some league mate have him for free. So if I've got somebody I can drop, and so when I say enforcement bid, like I'll throw like 3% out there just so nobody gets him for $1.
No, I think that's fair. Like, yeah, if you want to pick up Latavius, you can do it for free. If you got him a week ago when this kind of went down and just snapped him up, that's fine. Again, just trying to tell you, don't blow that, 30% of your fab, even 10% of your fab, even 5% of your fab on this situation, because it's just so unclear at the time being. We will have bigger and better guys to chase as the weeks go on. Kenneth Gainwell had a touchdown yesterday, short run. Also had another touchdown nullified when Lane Johnson crossed the line of scrimmage. I'm not too mad at Lane, though, because then we got that nasty Jalen Hurts to Dallas Goedert touchdown. So that was fun to see. I guess my question, though, Dwayne, isn't Kenneth Gainwell just Boston Scott now? And like, if we remove their names and we said, hey, here's Boston Scott playing 35% snaps behind Miles Sanders, he gets some carries, he gets some receptions, like nobody would be interested in Boston Scott. But because it's Kenneth Gainwell and because he's a rookie and because he was like a deep sleeper for a lot of fantasy guys, I feel like he's almost getting marked up more than he should be.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, but when you can get young legs, you want them. Like, I would rather put money on Kenneth Gainwell than Latavius Murray. That's me. Because the way I look at it is, if Miles Sanders went down, okay, just like if Tyson went down, that's the door open for Gainwell. That's door number one. Door number two would be Sanders, who hasn't necessarily been a great pro to this point. He's been okay. If Sanders were to struggle, they have a back they like, that's a young back that could start to take over more of the work. He could push it to be more of a true 50-50. If Sanders really screws up and were to start fumbling or something weird, you know how these things go. There's a better path in my chance, like for Gainwell to gain work. Gainwell to gain work. You see what I didn't even mean to do, but I did there.
Got him.
From Miles Sanders versus Latavius Murray, with the Ravens. And so I like the upside of Gainwell. I would definitely put more money on him from a waiver wire standpoint than what I would do with Murray. So, 35% of the snaps is not bad. 10% of the targets is solid. Yet you're right. It is Boston Scott type numbers, but I think there's a reason that you should want to put more on Gainwell. And it is because he was the hyped up, not just because he's hyped for a certain reason. And I think those reasons are still legit. So if he's available, I definitely want him. 32% targets per route run. Like, that's really good. That means when he's out there, they're trying to get the ball to him. So I like him. Handled half of the long down and distance work, handled all of the 2-minute offense work, 100%, handled all of it. So the other positive I like about a player like Gainwell, let's say something did happen to Miles Sanders, there's a chance Boston Scott, Jalen Scott, an old Ravens receiver. Boston Scott doesn't really get much of the work. And all of a sudden Gainwell is sitting up top with pretty much everything and an offense that looks better, has a better offensive line. So I do like Kenneth Gainwell.
And Scott, to be fair, when Sanders has missed some time, was getting like a 70% snap rate. Like, they were fine to promote their quote unquote scat back to lead back duties in the past. And yeah, credit to the Eagles. You mentioned some of those, just target numbers for Gainwell. They made life so much easier for Hurts in week one compared to last year. In 2020, 42.8% of Hurts' passing yards came on Yak. Yesterday, 63.6%. Only Jimmy G had more than Hurts. So we've seen the arm downfield, and he can run around with the best.
Hurts looked great, man. If you own Hurts, you should be so glad right now, which, I mean, we had him as part of the quarterback draft plan here. You know, it was him. Dak was Dak if he's sliding. And then it was, you should get Russ Wilson if he's sliding. And then the next pick was, you should take Tom Brady. And if you didn't get that, it was Jalen Hurts. If you have any of those quarterbacks, you're really happy after week one.
Yeah, and just so you know, people, like if someone Twitter me, added me today, what the hell I'm saying, and they just made the point like, hey, Ian, I got Trey Lance, but instead of getting Cousins, I got Jalen Hurts. Like the Cousins thing was to take in like the last round of your draft because you would have to take Lance before him anyway, and you don't want to use, you know,
whatever, Ian. That guy's just way smarter than you.
My point is, though, if you're in his situation and you have Jalen Hurts, you do not need a second quarterback on your roster. Cut that guy. If you're going through this and you are looking at like, oh, should I cut this running back or wide receiver? If you have a sick quarterback or tight end, you don't need two of them. Worry about the bye week later. And yeah,
get ready, folks. It's coming. The Trey Lance and Justin Field cuts are all just around the corner after everybody spent 10th, 11th, and 12th round picks. It's happening.
And that goes without saying, people. When you see Fields and Lance out there, scoop them up with a sense of urgency. Moving on to some wide receivers, we got Sterling Shepard up next. He was someone that just continuously, you know, whenever I do these volume versus ADP studies, it was like he was just so much more volume than people were really giving credit for. Matt Harmon, you know, has been a big fan of his reception perception over the years. And yeah, I mean, Shepard, man, he gets 6 targets every single game, seemingly. I think he's only had like, it's a bonkers stat. Mike Clay was the first one, I think, bring it up. It's like, he has 6 targets in every game except one when you're not counting injuries since like halfway through 2018 or something absolutely ridiculous. So great game last week. And, you know, with the schedule coming up, Washington Thursday night isn't great. After that, though, Falcons, Saints, Cowboys, rough one against the Rams, then gets the Panthers. So I guess with Sterling Shepard, he's someone that I think we could say like, yeah, he probably shouldn't have been a free agent to begin with. So question one is how confident, I guess, are you? How much would you want to spend to go get him? And question two, like, do we need to project Shepard as number one Giants receiver moving forward? Because not that Kenny Golladay looked bad, but it seemed like Shepard, man, was getting number one treatment almost.
Daniel Jones loves him.
Exactly.
You know, so, I mean, when I look at, you know, Shepard, 95% of the snaps, 93% of the routes, 25% of the targets, 27% targets per route run, average depth of target of 9.9. He had 29% of the air yards. You know, I love him. And he's a guy that, to your point, he was going too late. Shepard does battle injuries. And so you're always at risk of having to deal with that. He seems like he misses 2 to 4 games every single season, and they're kind of scattered, and you're like, oh, is he questionable all week? Is he going to play? So, I mean, you could have to deal with some of that, but if you're sitting there and you were really aggressive, like let's say you took, you know, 2 or 3 backs early, and then you were aggressive in the middle rounds on some receivers. And let's say you took a Callaway who struggled in week 1, which I think was more game script than anything. Let's say you took, you know, some of the younger guys like Elijah Moore or whoever, and you need someone. Like you're like, man, I gotta have somebody I can put in my lineup for next week. Like Sterling Shepard's your answer. Cole Beasley's your other answer. Like he was falling way too far in drafts as well. They're really both similar situations. Shepard, the younger player, obviously the player probably, if you had to say had some sort of upside left, I would say that's more with Shepard than it is with Beasley. But both are guys that you could go out and grab. And for a player like that I know I'm going to insert in my lineup immediately, and it could get, even if it's just going to give me 3 to 4 weeks to let somebody else on my team break out. I mean, I'll put 10 to 15%, you know, on a player like that. I'm not going to go spend 30%, you know, of my fab on Sterling Shepard, but I'll put 10 to 15%. If you really want to push it, you could go 20%. Like last year was really his breakout year as far as targets per route run. It was a little bit later in age, but in his second season or third season, you know, with Daniel Jones, and he had some injury problems. So I think there is some potential upside. And could we see Sterling Shepard finish the season, you know, as a low end wide receiver 2? I think that's in the range of outcomes, but I feel great about him as my wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4, especially point. PPR, folks. PPR standard, less so. PPR is the key here. Half PPR, a little step down. Standard, I'm not near as interested in Sterling Shepard.
It's a great point on Cole Beasley as well. 13 freaking targets in week 1. People, I understand maybe you're not the biggest fan of the guy. Guess who is? Josh Allen, and he's the guy that's trying to get his fantasy points with it. So Cole Beasley, Sterling Shepard, you can throw them right in the starting lineup, and you can throw them in over, I think, the next trio of guys we want to talk about. Dwayne, well, let's start with Christian Kirk in this Arizona Cardinals offense, because damn it, Cliff, he's doing it again, Dwayne. AJ Green's out there in 2 wide receiver sets, or I don't even know if they're running 2 wide receiver sets, but he's getting de facto number 2 wide receiver treatment. Meanwhile, freaking Rondale Moore is being reduced to a distant wide receiver 4. And Christian Kirk, as great of a game as he had, even Rondale made good use of his opportunities. He's not even getting all the damn usage. So I'm sure people can see where we're going with this, but unfortunately, I don't think we can trust these young stud receivers because Cliff can't stop feeding these veterans that he shouldn't even have allegiance to. Like, did he ever exchange a word with AJ Green before February or March? Like, did Larry Fitzgerald know who Cliff was before he became his head coach? Like, the fact that he's leaning on these guys more than his players that he drafted and is bringing up is just completely mind-boggling to me, Dwayne. So, got a little off track there, but Christian Kirk, what do you think?
It's all right. Passionate, man. So here's the thing with Kirk. He is going to need more routes to perform consistently. This last week, he was only out there for 66%. And the 3 most popular personnel groups that the Cardinals use are 4 wide receivers, which is 10 personnel, 3 wide receivers, which is 11, and then 12. So 12 is what they go to hit play action. It's what they'll use a lot to close out games. And so if you look at yesterday, the Cardinals used 10 and 11 personnel on over 70% of their plays in the first half, but they got ahead by, so much so early. They only used those personnel groups 33% of the time in the second half. So what does that tell you? It tells you that Kirk has sneaky upside. Once they're in more typical games, Kirk's going to be on the field more. I'm thinking his routes are going to be somewhere around 70 to 75%. And once he gets to that number, he's the same as guys that were being taken like Laviska Shenault in the heck, I saw Laviska Shenault go in the 6th round of drafts, but should have been more like a 7th to 8th rounder. And you can get Christian Kirk off the waiver wire. So here's the other part. His targets per routes run was really encouraging, 22%. Second on the team to Rondale Moore, who we'll talk about in just a second. But it was actually higher than DeAndre Hopkins. It was higher than AJ Green, who was at 19%. AJ's problem is over the last 3 years, his targets per route run have gone down every single year. So he's just kind of at that point in his career that he is what he is. Yes, he had 87% of the routes. Yes, he had 20% of the targets, but that 9% target per route run is about where he's at. I think he's going to be less. So I actually like Kirk because here's the huge news around Christian Kirk. He was in the slot for 96% of the routes yesterday of his routes. That was something we didn't know he was going to get because in the preseason, we saw those looks going to Rondale Moore. So the way I look at this offense, DeAndre Hopkins is your 1A. Christian Kirk is your number 2. He's going to get the better matchups. He's going to work inside, even though he's going to be on the field less than AJ Green. Christian Kirk needs to be owned in pretty much every format. I would say if you're in a 12-team format, needs to be owned. If you're in a 10-team format, probably needs to be owned. If you're in an 8-team format, unless it's a super deep, roster situation, you can leave him out there. You probably already have someone better on your team. But outside of that, Christian Kirk, I'm putting right in there. I think he carries more upside than Sterling Shepard. So if you're an upside person and you're like, you know what, just give me the person that I think could like blow the roof off this thing, it's Christian Kirk. Yesterday he was Kyler Murray's favorite target on 3rd downs, 33%. He was his favorite target in the end zone, 40%. And he had most of the area. He had the most air yards, he had the highest average depth of target at 13.2. DeAndre Hopkins outdid him in air yards, 32% to 25%, but only because DeAndre was obviously out there, getting more targets because he was on the field the whole time. And Hopkins, man, looked awesome. Like what a receiver. He's not dead, folks. Everybody wanted to keep moving him down the boards. Look, I was guilty of it. I took Metcalf and Jefferson towards the end of draft season over him because I wasn't getting enough exposure to those players. And so those were the drafts where I passed Hopkins and I'm looking at it. I'm like, this is just like normal, tried and true. DeAndre Hopkins getting to play with Kyler Murray, who's now healthy again. That's great. So anyway, on Kirk, I call him a top 48 receiver for now, Ian, but he's got that boom bust range on him where, man, he could be in the top 24 and folks are sitting there going, wow, this is like what I thought I drafted with Laviska Shenault, and it's actually Christian Kirk.
I'm fine with wide receiver for boomer bust treatment. I thought you were going to say top 36, and I was going to be mad, Dwayne. I'm not.
You're going to give me the break tap, and I would deserve the break tap there. But again, I do think 10 and 11 personnel will be used more in a game where they're not winning. So like if you look at the stats from this game, and this is what's cool, I'm putting in the utilization report for you guys this year, is so each team, I've got an overview. And it tells you how many plays did they run, how many plays per minute. So you know their pace, then you know what were their run pass splits. But then I give you a quick view of like how many plays in the game did they trail? Were they close or did they lead? So you get because context matters, Ian, as you know, because what you want to do is you want to look for teams that you're like, wow, they actually threw the ball quite a bit in every single scenario. So if you look at the Cardinals, they led on 84% of the plays, folks. 50% of the time when they were leading, they dropped back to pass. So that really is what hurt Christian Kirk most yesterday. The Cardinals are going to be in a lot of other more competitive games than what we saw, which we thought would be more competitive with Tennessee yesterday. It just turned out that it wasn't.
Upcoming schedule for the Cardinals does set up pretty nicely, Dwayne. Got the Vikings, Jaguars, Rams, tough one, 49ers, Browns, Texans. I smell some blowups in there. I'm still not super sure Kyler Murray can consistently enable more than one high-end guy. And it's not even non-Kyler. It's just like DeAndre Hopkins is such a damn target hog. He's going to get 150 plus. I think whoever else is going to have to be awfully efficient. Certainly a nice first step for Kirk and Rondale. Let's just get Green's corpse out there. That's all I ask, Cliff. That's all I ask. A couple more for you guys. Nelson Aguilar caught 5 of 7 targets for 72 yards and a tutty. We had Jacoby Myers at 9 targets, James White 6, Jonnu Smith 5, Hunter Henry 3, Kendrick Bourne 3, and Damian Harris 3. Offense.
You're like me today, dude. You're like me. You're so like me today with the fumbling of the words. 70
minutes in the pod. We're getting loosey-goosey out here, Dwayne. But with this pretty spread out offense, I thought Mac Jones looked really good. In particular, he had this dope drop in the bucket to James White on a wheel route in the backfield. I mean, the guy has had 99 snaps now combined, preseason, regular season, only 1 turnover-worthy play, which was a fumble on his first career drop back. So I think we can cut him some slack there. Mac Jones is looking good. With that said, do you think there's still a receiver other than Jacoby Myers in this offense that can give us some PPR goodness? And could it be Mr. Nelson Aguilar?
Yeah, I think it could. I mean, Nelson Aguilar, if you look at it, like as a player that we loved early in the offseason, and it's just one of those things where he wasn't out there or he was hurt. He was running a go route every single play. So I think there's an opportunity for Aguilar if you play in a 12-team league, let's say. And what's nice about Aguilar is he could bring some value in either kind of format, right? Standard or PPR, because he's really going to be more of the big play receiver. His average depth of target was 13.2, 34% of the air yards, where you got Jacoby Myers working underneath 6.4 yard ADOT and 25% of the air yards. So I still obviously think this is Myers is the player to own here, but I do think in deeper leagues, you could see Nelson Aguilar provide you some wide receiver 3 value, especially later whenever you need somebody to put in, from a standpoint of covering your bye weeks, covering an injury, that kind of thing. He's not a player I think is going to pop, big Ian. But I think if you're in a deep kind of league, he's a guy worth owning. I would min bid it, I'm talking 2% type thing. He's not somebody I'm going to go put over 5% or more on, but he's my contingent bid, Ian. He's like 4 down the list when I miss everybody else because people go nuts. I'm like, I got Nelson Aguilar. Let's see what happens.
You wake up and you check your roster and you got Aguilar. And
like, you see it and you immediately just swipe right and shut it.
Dude, I was bummed. I don't want to share too many stories about my teams, but I had this dynasty league. I got Fields and Lance early. It's a super flex. And I was like, I'll get Fitzpatrick to settle me over for a little while until they start. And earlier this week, I put in a bid on Tyrod Taylor thinking, let's just give myself a little more flexibility. And I got beat out for Tyrod. Fitzmagic's going to miss freaking 8 weeks with the hip thing. I'm leaving the squad hanging. It's poor management, no one to blame but myself. And enough about my team that nobody gives a single shit about, because we got one more situation to break down, Dwayne, and that is the Denver Broncos. Miraculously, Jerry Jeudy is only expected to miss 4 to 6 weeks with this ankle injury. I thought it could have been 4 to 6 years after I saw that thing live. Like, it looked that bad. I'm not, I think, Dwayne, you said in the chat, he's got some Gumby freaking bones going on or something. Whatever it is.
Yeah, there's Gumby somewhere in the family tree.
Whatever it is, thank you for not taking Jerry Jeudy from us this early, injury gods. He should be back by November. Hopefully he is balling by the time that comes around. With that said, we're now expecting 3 wide receiver sets to be Cortland Sutton, KJ Hamler, and everyone's favorite number 4 wide receiver, except mine. I still love you, Auden Tate, Tim Patrick. So Teddy Bridgewater, I thought looked pretty good, man. He had in the same drive, he stiff armed like 2 defenders and he managed to complete the pass afterwards. He had the bomb, the Hamler that maybe a little bit underthrown. It hit him in the chest. He, should have been a 50-yard touchdown. Do you think that beyond Sutton and Noah Fant, either Patrick or Hamler can hold some value while Jeudy is sidelined?
I think it's going to be tough. Again, I know, and I'm trying to be clear about these things because I know a lot of people really want to know. It's a deep league. These are deep league type pickups. I would prioritize Patrick first because I think he's going to be out there in the 2 wide sets. Obviously more than what we're going to see probably with Hamler. Hamler yesterday was only out there for 49% of the routes. So Patrick was out there for 66% of the routes. He did get slightly more playing time once Jerry Jeudy was gone from the game. We don't have a big sample set, though, size on that. So it's not like something we can really lean into. It just is what it is. And coaches make adjustments right after these injuries. But I think it's most logical to think that Patrick would be the one that you would want to own. You did have KJ Hamler with a sheesh moment, Ian.
Yeah, man. Hit him in the chest, like I said.
You did have KJ with a sheesh. So, so, I mean, he could give you that big play, but if I'm going to go after someone, it's Patrick. I do like Patrick for right now over probably, he's right there with Nelson Agholor. It's a similar type of situation. I just like him as a player a little bit more than Agholor based on what we've seen in the past when he's had his chances. But I think it's pretty clearly, this is the biggest thing on this one, man, is Fant. Fant yesterday, targets per route run, 31 freaking percent. Like this dude went bonkers. Like he was in 34, looking at Jerry Jeudy, he was next up, but he obviously got hurt. He was at 35%. Cortland Sutton still kind of coming along 11%. So he's obviously still trying to, and he had a tough matchup, with Bradbury yesterday for someone that's really good in a matchup for the Cortland Sutton type receiver. So that wasn't an easy matchup for Sutton. I expect to see Sutton and Fant to be the 2 main guys, but man, Fant like really, really impressed yesterday. The 66% routes, that's the issue. You got Albert O out there with 44%. And so this happened last year with Fant. So that's the tricky spot is Fant is not getting up. We talked earlier about that 80% number with Hockenson. You at least want to get to 70%. And Fant's not at that. He's at 66%, but being heavily looked at by Teddy Bridgewater when he's on the field, that 31% number, that's elite. That's really big, for a tight end.
Might be tough for Fant to break through in that top 5 because we can only have 5 guys.
But he can be a top 10.
Yeah, exactly.
Be a top 10.
So you'll take that 8 days of the week. And that is going to wrap up one of our 8 editions of the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast of this week.
I have one more, Ian. Can I have one more?
Yeah.
Just one more.
We're not wrapped up. Screw that. We got one.
Just one.
Let's go.
There are some others that you guys can see tomorrow in the utilization report, but I just want to give you one more because this is just kind of a teaser, for what you got. I'm super excited, about this is the best utilization article I've ever put out in my life. And so it's going to be set up to where it'll have at the very top, these are the players that you should focus on right away. So if you're the type of person you want to come in, you're like, Dwayne, just like feed me who I need to go pick up. It's going to be there. I'll talk about waivers, trade targets, all that. But then if you're the kind of geek like me and you want to go in and look, okay, well, I want to just kind of look at every team. I'm breaking down every team where I give you the overview of the team. Then I'm breaking down their quarterback, which I've never done in the utilization report. Quarterback's going to be in there. Then you have running backs, and then I have the receivers and tight ends and all the stuff that you guys love. So all the things we've been talking about, routes, targets per routes run. Are they getting the short down and distance, long down distance, 2-minute offense? Who are your true 3-down backs versus not? I probably just need to put out a simple article later every week, Ian, that's just like, here's your 3-down backs. You're done. Here they are. Here's the 7. Here are the guys that are next up, kind of waiting in the wings, hoping that they can turn into a 3-down back. That would probably be like a killer article that I could write. I need a short one that I can write in like 30 minutes. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, so that's what we're all looking for, Dwayne.
That's what we're all looking for. Yeah. So here's my guy. Terrace Marshall yesterday, only out there in 65% of the routes. But again, similar to what we talked about with Kirk, if you look at this team and you look at the overview, which I give you, 59% of the plays with the lead, 41% of the plays were in a close game. So within 3 points, 59% with a lead of 4 more. 0% of the plays yesterday for the Panthers were trailing. So if you look at their usage of 11 personnel versus 12, it was a little bit off from what you would normally expect. But the cool thing is Marshall still got to 65% of the routes. And if you look at his targets per route run, highest on the team, 28%. Average depth of target of 8.2. So he wasn't just the deep receiver. Yesterday, it's funny. We got what we actually thought last year going in. Robbie Anderson was the deep threat with an 8 out of 30. And then you had DJ Moore working the intermediate and short with an 8 out of 11.4. But back to Terrace Marshall, my one last, if somebody drops him, or because you can probably still get him up for nothing. I think he finishes wide receiver 72 yesterday in PPR formats. But everything else, all the underlyings look good. 50% of the end zone targets went to Terrace Marshall. 50% of the third down targets went to Terrace Marshall. They're looking to this guy. I've talked about it before. Terrace Marshall is this year's Chase Claypool. Ooh. He's never going to get to 80% of the routes. He'll be lucky to get to 75% of the routes, but the way they want to use him, there's a shot here. And Sam Darnold looked just good enough to think, hey, maybe there's a chance. And remember, we saw Teddy Bridgewater, not a great quarterback either, support 3 receivers in this offense last year. And this is all with CMC gobbling up everything. I mean, I know it's King Henry, but really, is there anybody that's king besides CMC? Like, he's it. Like, and I won't go into all his utilization, but it's in here. You see it. He handled everything. So Terrace Marshall, especially if you're in a 12-teamer, somebody drops him or you can get him for nothing because nobody's going to be thinking about Terrace Marshall. They're like, this guy screwed me week 1. Underlying data says and he's a better own right now than Rondell Moore. You'd rather own him over that. He's kind of he's closer than people think to Elijah Moore.
Yeah, disappointing debut for all these guys. If you were in DraftKings and you cash played all these, sub 3.7K receivers, probably wasn't a great day, but maybe you faced a bunch of other people that did. So either way, Panthers upcoming schedule: Saints, Texans, Cowboys, Eagles, Vikings, Giants, Falcons. Seems like quite a few games where we will be saying plus matchups all week long. Everyone, this is going to wrap up the PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. Make sure you check out Dwain's utilization report on PFF.com tomorrow. I will also have my week 2 QB superlatives out as well, where you can get a nice preview of the week, get some cool tidbits from last week, and see ultimately what I'm thinking will happen with these quarterbacks ahead of week 2. So for Dwain, I'm Ian. Thank you as always for listening to PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. And until next time, take care, everybody.